Welcome, Frankfort and Franklin County residents, and thank you for tuning in to the Candidate Forum for State Representative for the 57th House District. This is the forum for the Democratic primary election held May 21st, 2024. After the primary election, one of these candidates will move on to the general election, which will be held in November. I'm J.C. Young, and I'm honored to serve on the Chamber Governmental Affairs Committee and your MC for this event. The first meeting of the Kentucky General Assembly occurred in 1792, shortly after Kentucky was granted statehood. For 230 years, Frankfort has stood as the Commonwealth's capital and has been the meeting place of the legislature. The State House is made up of 100 elected representatives, while the State Senate it consists of 38 elected senators. After mandated redistricting 2 years ago by the legislature, the 57th House District is composed of western and central parts of Franklin County. The obligations of state representative include policy research, drafting bills, reading and considering legal opinions, legislative committee work, taking concerns from constituents, evaluating state programs, and assessing how legislation will affect their constituents and the state budget. The office of state representative is for a 2-year term. The office that you're seeking has a storied history in the state's capital, and it's worthy of candidates such as yourselves. In this candidate forum for state representative for the 57th District, we're honored to have Miss Erika Hancock, Miss Kristie Powe. Before we begin, I would like to thank and recognize the Chamber of Commerce for establishing this candidate forum and the Frankfort Plant Board for hosting and broadcasting this event. Serving as our esteemed panelists and those doing the real work at this function are Frankfort Area Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Ms. Tish Shade, Chamber Chair-elect, Chair of the Frankfort First Foundation, Associate Executive Director of the AGC of Kentucky, Ms. Lynn Faulkner, CEO of Expree Credit Union and immediate past chair of the Frankfort Area Chamber of Commerce, Mr. John Graham. Candidates will have 2 minutes for opening remarks and 2 minutes for closing remarks. You'll have 1 minute to responses for questions and then 1 minute follow-ups if asked by panelists. We had a draw prior to the forum, and we're going to begin our first question with we're going to begin our opening statements with Ms. Hancock. Ms. Hancock, you have 2 minutes for an opening remarks.
Well, thank you, JC, and you all for donating or being here today to inform the voters. It's very nice of you all to take time out of your day. I am Erika Hancock. I grew up in northern Kentucky in a small town called Taylor Mill. I graduated from Scott High School. Upon graduation, I attended Morehead State University, where I met my husband, Jeff, of 23 years. My junior year, I transferred to the University of Kentucky, where I graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Integrated Strategic Communications. Upon graduating, I took a sales job at the Berry Company in Louisville until State Farm agent Sally Hill-Stumbo offered me a position in her agency with the intent of taking over upon her retirement. And in June of 2001, I was hired as one of the youngest State Farm female agents. Shortly after starting my career, Jeff and I started our family. We have a daughter, Polly, age 20, who is a women's gender studies major at the University of Louisville. I have a son, Houston. He's 16 and a sophomore at Frankfort High School. And when Derek announced his retirement, the why me quickly became why not me. You know, as a successful business owner and mother, I've been very fortunate in my life, even though I've had some challenges. And I feel like it's almost an obligation to give back to Frankfort and Franklin County that has been so good to our family. And the timing for myself, my family, and my business is the perfect time. And I know that I can continue the groundwork laid by Representative Graham to fight for the Frankfort and Franklin County constituents in a respectful manner by not demanding a voice, but by earning one in a mutual, respectful way.
Ms. Powe, 2 minutes, opening remarks.
Perfect. Well, first, again, I'd like to say thank you all so much. I'm so glad that we had the platform to do this because of the Frankfort Plant Board. So thank you all. And I'm glad to be sitting up here next to Miss Erika, who I like very much. My name is Kristie Powe. I am the daughter of the late Ed Powe and Janice Powe. They were also very active in our community. I grew up here in Frankfort. We moved here when I was 9. I attended Hearn Elementary, Elkhorn Middle School, graduated from Franklin County High School, and came back to graduate from the Kentucky State University with a dual degree in psychology and sociology. I have made Frankfort my home. It is my community. I'm very active in this community, as my parents were. I'm the president of Focus on Race Relations here in Frankfort. I am the chair of the Frankfort Human Rights Commission. I am a member of the Rotary Club. I am a member of Kiwanis. I am a member of an artistic group here called Black Female Artists of Frankfort. I wonder myself how I have time to do other things, but I squeeze it in. I was a constituent services analyst at LRC for 8 years, and in that role, I had the prime opportunity to actually listen to the constituents and what their needs were and their wants were, and also interact with all 138 of our legislators and what they needed for me to tell their constituents. In serving that role as liaison, I realized that when that opportunity came available, when Representative Graham decided he was not going to run for re-election for his seat, that was my opportunity to get in and show the difference that I can make on a different platform at LRC. Thank you so much for having me.
Great job. Thank you for your opening statements. Our first question is going to come from Ms. Tish Shade, and it's going to be directed to you, Ms. Powe. You'll have 1 minute to respond.
What do you see as the top concerns, particularly from the business community, that you could help address in our district?
Clearly, there is a concern, excuse me, for growing Frankfort. Frankfort is a beautiful, quaint little town, but there's a lot of stagnant. We've been dead for quite some time. We've got a lot of empty storefronts. We have a lot of buildings that are just falling apart, and the question is why? So we actually have to look at that and wonder, how can we get businesses to come here? How can we improve the revenue for Frankfort and Franklin County and ensure that everyone is being served? We want to do that in a way, though, that does keep our green space safe and easy. We still need public access to parks. We need walkways. We need bikeways. But we also need businesses and commerce to come in as well. So there's a nice thin line that we have to walk. I am part of the community side of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So one of the things that we've been working on for 2 years is how to make that happen, how to bring businesses in, and how to keep our agriculture and our farmland safe and green. So I'm going to keep trying, but that's definitely a concern.
Ms. Shade, I'll have you repeat the question for Ms. Hancock. 1 minute, Ms. Hancock.
What do you see as the top concerns, particularly from the business community, that you could help address in our district?
You know, I am a small business owner, and we always joke with my my competitors and colleagues that we just pass around the business. So the growth is definitely something that is a concern. And I think that it's more not just that we need growth. We need to figure out how to have the tough conversations to have the growth. I think we all can agree that growth is important, and getting new families into Frankfort to better our economy has to come with mutual conversation. And, we're going to agree to disagree on some things, but coming to common ground to move forward for the betterment of the entire community.
Our next question will come from Ms. Faulkner, and that's going to be directed to you, Ms. Hancock. You'll have 1 minute.
What is one thing you admire about your primary opponent, and what is one thing in which you differ?
Oh. Okay, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Okay, one thing I admire about anybody that steps out and to do this role is it is not for the faint of heart. So I admire anybody that steps up. So Kristie stepping up to do this is just, to me, is very admirable. And what steps me apart is my experience in business and as a mother. I feel like that gives me an opportunity to, being in business, you have to have a capability of bringing differing perspectives together on a continual basis, and finding a common ground to move forward. And that's where I think I stand out as a candidate.
Ms. Powe, 1 minute.
Okay. So one thing that I admire greatly about Erika is that she's just a beautiful person. I admire the fact that she seems to be a great wife and mother to her children, and it takes a lot to be a small business owner here in Frankfort, especially as a female. One place that we differ is in experience. I have experience within the legislature. I was there for 8 years. I have experience being in a nonpartisan position, so I know how to speak to both sides of the party lines. I'm familiar with how to draft bills and how policy works. I've done the research, the background for these bills and for the constituents. I've spoken with constituents. So I think the only place that we differ is in experience.
Mr. Graham, this question is directed to Ms. Powe. Ms. Powe, you'll have 1 minute.
Ms. Powe, you just talked about being in the legislature. The Republicans hold a supermajority. As a member of the minority party, how can you get wins for Frankfort?
It's about compromise. One of my roles in Focus on Race Relation is to engage people in open and honest conversation and to make that which is uncomfortable comfortable. So I'm familiar with speaking with people who don't quite agree with me or on opposite ends of different policies. I have worked with these legislators, and I know that there's always a soft and a sweet spot. It's about finding that compromise. There's never going to be, where everyone is happy, unfortunately, with the supermajority. But if we can find a middle ground, which is what I strive to do just in my daily life, that's what I'm seeking. I'm seeking to not be overspoken. I'm seeking to not be unheard. I'm going to make my position known and stand firm in it, but I'm going to look for that compromise to make sure that at least we can try to push something through where everyone can be happy.
Ms. Hancock, 1 minute.
You repeat the question again?
The Republicans hold a supermajority in both the Senate and the House. As a member of the minority caucus, how can you get wins for Frankfort?
I believe almost my lack of experience at the state legislature gives me an advantage because I'm going in with the basics of we just need to start building relationships again. My whole entire business model with being a State Farm agent is building relationships. And I'm good at it. I mean, that's why I've been successful at it. I mean, you'll have a hard time. My clients are my family. So I know that that's the hurdle up there, especially when you're across the aisle. But, so far, most of my support, even in my current campaign, is coming from both sides of the aisle. So I know that I can be a voice with being a minority up there for Frankfort and Franklin County.
We're going to come back to Ms. Shade, and this will be directed towards you, Ms. Hancock. This question, you'll have 1 minute.
Another issue that faces local businesses is that even if they find skilled workers, they often cannot pass a drug test. What can the legislature do to help address that issue?
Well, I mean, I would assume that the drug testing that they're mentioning is, I wouldn't assume it's any hard drugs. It would probably be marijuana, which needs to be decriminalized at this point. I think we're behind the 8 ball in Kentucky of decriminalizing it. Getting revenue from it. There's other states that have already kind of wrinkled out the problems with it, and I think that is definitely something we need to be talking about together across the aisle to move forward and bring Kentucky into the next century on that.
Ms. Powe, 1 minute.
I'm going to agree with Ms. Hancock, actually. I think that for me, a lot of what I do is look at the background behind why they are doing this, what businesses are requiring this, and what's the reason for that. A lot of times, just as Ms. Hancock said, we're not talking about hard drugs. No one wants to bring in an employee that is, strung out on meth. But clearly, if we're dealing with marijuana, what's the amount that's found? Is there any amount that's in their system that they would say is allowable? We need to decriminalize marijuana and the recreational use. That would solve a lot of problems. That would help our revenue, and that would eliminate some of the issues that we're having with the drug checks with employment.
Our next question comes from Ms. Faulkner, and it's going to be directed to you, Ms. Powe. You'll have 1 minute.
House Bill 2 would allow state dollars to go to private or charter schools, something not currently allowed under the state constitution. The General Assembly solution is to put this amendment to change the state constitution on the November 5th ballot. What are your thoughts on this move?
I do not agree with that. at all. I think that we need to not only continue funding our public schools, but we need to make sure that we're allocating even more money to it. I think one of the problems right now that we need to look into, especially when we're dealing with teachers, I understand that right now the Board of Education, they're the ones that decide what raises the teachers are going to get, but that comes through the SEEK program. We have to continue putting more money into the SEEK program so that they can allocate that money to the public school systems. The answer is not to defund public schools. We need to ensure that as the majority of our children go there and can afford to go there, that's where our funding is going, not to private organizations where they already get funding from elsewhere.
Ms. Hancock, 1 minute.
You know, public education is why the 20th century is the American century. And by taking funds away from our public education system is a step back, not a step forward. Both of my children attended public schools, and we could have afforded a private education for both of our children, but there's so many more things in academics that they learn in a public school setting. Being on the site-based decision-making council at Bondurant, I also was charged with allocating funds to hire teachers and fire teachers and eliminate positions, and that's just not something that they should worry about. We should be worrying about educating our future to make sure that they have the best opportunity to have the American dream, and that is definitely not with the charter schools or taking any funding away from public education.
Our next question comes from Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, this will be directed towards Ms. Hancock. Ms. Hancock, you'll have 1 minute to respond.
In addition to House Bill 2 that's going to be on the ballot in November, Senate Bill 143 would prevent non-citizens from voting in Kentucky elections. This is already not allowed in the state, but cities in the other parts of the country have allowed it in certain local elections. How would you explain this amendment to your potential constituents?
You know, I think this comes back to the civility that happens at the state legislature. I think this is a bill that does everything to just divide and create fear behind the election process that's not there, that doesn't exist. I mean, these things aren't happening. And I think that by putting these bills up there is just another way to divide voters and have fear, fear-based votes for candidates. So I don't think it's happening. I think it's just a way to create fear, and it's definitely not something that I would even support.
Well, the reality is it is happening with the supermajority. Just as we hoped that the DEI bill wouldn't happen, it happened. That discussion is a difficult discussion that I would have with the constituents, but one thing that I would do is just encourage citizenship. That is one push that I would do to make sure that everyone becomes a citizen, and we need to make that more public. We need to make people aware of how they can do that. That's information that you don't hear often, the programs that we have that are available, but we need to make this a more inclusive community and make sure that everyone that lives here feels comfortable to be a community member. Then we won't have these issues, and then we can worry about the next bill that they're going to introduce. But they are going to introduce it, so it's a reality.
We'll start back up here at the top. Ms. Shade, this question will be directed towards Ms. Powe. Ms. Powe, you'll have 1 minute.
How do you feel about letting people with a felony get their voting rights back? And then if there was a bill introduced, or would you support that?
I would 100% support it. Here's the thing. If we are saying that prison is a punishment for the crime and someone serves their prison term, they have served their punishment. We cannot continue to punish them for the rest of their lives for a crime they have already paid for. That's what we're doing right now in society. Once they get out, they're already limited on the jobs that they can get, housing that they can get. And now we're saying that you can't even vote, which is a basic civil right. Their rights should be restored once their punishment, once the crime that they have been punished for has been served. If their time has served, it's time to give them back their rights.
Ms. Shea, would you repeat that question for Ms. Hancock? Ms. Hancock, you have 1 minute.
How do you feel about letting people with a felony get their voting rights back? And if a bill was introduced, would you support it?
I would absolutely support a bill that would restore voting rights for people that have already served their time. There is no reason to continue to punish somebody that has already put put the time in. I have a good friend of mine whose husband had had his rights taken away, and he started a group that is advocating right now at the Capitol for that. And in any way that I can help that group to restore those rights is something that I definitely want to be a part of.
Our next question comes from Ms. Faulkner. It's going to be directed to you, Ms. Hancock. You'll have 1 minute.
Skilled labor is a major obstacle for businesses for filling jobs in the community. What can our representatives do to help grow our workforce in size and skill?
I mean, we definitely need to educate people and inform. Trade schools are a huge secondary education that we can offer our high school students. I know a lot of Frankfort High School, they do some trade skilled secondary education. But I think we need to make it something that people want to do. I think for so long, those types of jobs have been overlooked as something that isn't glamorous enough, I guess. And we need to bring that back and educate kids that aren't college material. So our youth would be, to me, the first place we could work, because they're obviously the ones that we can reach quickest to build those skilled workers up for our community.
Ms. Faulkner, would you repeat the question for Ms. Powe, please?
Skilled labor is a major obstacle for businesses for filling jobs in the community. What can our representatives do to help grow our workforce in size and skill?
Well, we can make sure that we're funding schools that provide skilled labor training. That's the first thing. Second thing we can do is make sure that we are raising the minimum wage. There are things that we can do to ensure that we are growing our economy and that we are strengthening our workforce. And we're just not doing that. We're allowing other businesses to come in and from different places and take our workforce, especially people that are working more from home now. They're getting paid more from other states while we stay stagnant. We have to address that.
Okay, Mr. Graham, this question will be directed towards Ms. Powe. Ms. Powe, you'll have 1 minute.
Thank you. Do you think that the General Assembly is adequately transparent?
No, I do not. I don't think that they are transparent at all, to be quite honest. I will say, and I will encourage everyone, continue to encourage everyone, watch the meetings, watch the hearings that are on the floor that are public, but a lot of things happen behind closed doors. There's a lot of things that are added to bills at the last minute or plugged into certain lines that people just don't know, because a lot of people aren't reading the bills line for line. That's a lack of transparency when you're trying to push something through with something you've added at the last minute. I think that we really need to focus on that, and that would be a goal of mine, is to make sure that people understand exactly what is happening, what's been added and what's been taken away from these bills.
Thank you.
Ms. Hancock?
I mean, I believe that there always needs to be more transparency. I think that there is some. I don't think it's as grim as the media puts out there sometimes, just knowing a lot of the legislators up there that are doing the good work. I think that, again, there are far extremes on both sides that make it worse than it actually is. But absolutely, when I get up there, I will be overly transparent. I think that part of the reason people have fear in the questions that they ask is because they don't feel approachable. The candidate or the representative doesn't feel like somebody they could have at their dinner table. That is something that I will bring to the table, as being accessible and approachable. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Shade, this question will be directed towards Ms. Hancock. Ms. Hancock, you'll have 1 minute.
Beginning in January 2025, medical marijuana will be legal in Kentucky. Do you consider this to be a step in the right direction, and would you support legalizing recreational use?
And I think I said this before. Absolutely, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think that other states that have gone before us have proven that it does bring revenue in, that there's ways to tax it. There's ways to protect the fear base behind it. And again, these are just issues that for so long the politicians have used to divide us. And finally, people are educating themselves on it and taking that divisiveness away and moving forward. And I think that this is something we can bring on any sensitive subjects that we're even faced today. Because 10 years ago, it was such a dividing topic, and now it's something that everybody is like, I mean, I think 80% or 85% of the people believe that it should be something that's not divisive. And so I absolutely 100%, I think it's a step in the right direction, and agree with recreational.
Ms. Powe?
I would agree. Look at us just last year and the year before last. It was completely knocked down. They've been trying to introduce this for a few years. Finally, we've made headway. So yes, it is a great step in the right direction, but it's a baby step. We need to continue taking those steps and strengthening that. It is time to decriminalize that. Look at the success that other states have had. We need to look at the numbers in that and follow suit. Kentucky generally plays the follow role. It would be nice once to be the leader in something and to be proud of that. I'm proud that we've taken a step finally to say that medical marijuana will be legal. Let's go with recreation next.
Our next question will come from Ms. Faulkner, and that's going to be directed to you, Ms. Powe.
What are the goals you would champion in your term?
The top two, I would champion unity in my community. One of the things that I feel like is lacking is that the majority of people in Frankfort and Franklin County, they go unheard, unseen, unknown. I feel like because there aren't a lot of means that the majority have. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of voice. They feel like there's influence and voice and money and power. They don't have that. So they tend to be stagnant and not vote, not get out, because they feel like they don't count. I want to raise that for them again. That's my first goal, to say, you are here and you are seen. The second goal is to make sure that people understand that the Kentucky State University is something that we should be proud of. It is our HBCU. There is revenue to be had in that too, and bringing our community together with our legislation. That's important.
Ms. Hancock, 1 minute.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
What are your top two goals that you would champion in your term?
Well, my first is, for far too long, our state workers and our state retirees have been a political punching bag up there. I mean, they have not had a cost of living raise. They have, as a small business owner, the team is the most important part of my office. And the state workers are the team of the state of Kentucky, and they need to be taken care of, and their voice definitely needs to be heard. And that is my very first goal when I get in. The second that I'm very passionate about is childcare. I have being a small business owner, Carrie has a daughter that comes to the office every day because childcare is just too expensive. And that not only helps our young families, but helps the workers or office people keep staff. So I think that's the two things I would start with.
We've now reached a time for closing remarks. You've both done a fantastic job. We had a draw before we started, so Ms. Powe, we're going to start with you. You'll have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
Perfect. So one thing I want to correct, hopefully did not misunderstand a question, but I would definitely support legislation that allowed people to get their civil rights back. I just want to add that. Another thing, I also am a small business owner. I am a licensed life and health insurance agent. My background is varied, quite honestly. Being in this community, working for this community, and serving this community is what I love to do. I am a public servant. I've lived my life with that motto, and I'll continue to do so as your next state representative for District 57. My website is Powe, POWEFORKY.com. That's Powe for Kentucky. You can also find me on Facebook under the same name. I am very transparent, very open, and available for any questions, anything you'd like to ask me. You can call me on the phone. Pretty much you can find me out in the community. I've seen quite a few of you out and about, so please feel free to ask, but I look forward to serving you publicly for the next couple of years.
Ms. Hancock, 2 minutes, closing remarks.
First I'd like to take the time to thank all the people who have supported me up to this point. Your belief in me is truly humbling, and I appreciate each and every one of you. My vision as a state representative is to lead with integrity, honesty, and civility. I know I can do this by being a strong voice of unity to our constituents, being a successful business owner and a mother. It's something that I'm gifted at. I know that I can have the tough conversations with people with differing perspectives and sometimes just agree to disagree. And for the past 4 months, I have built a strong base of support on both sides of the aisle that I know make me the best candidate to win in November, and I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
As we close, I would like to personally thank both of you for seeking this office. You have put your name on the ballot, spent your own time and money, skipped out on family events only to serve your community, and I want you to know that it's deeply appreciated. You all have both done a great job, a fabulous job, and I wish you the best in this election. There have been some election law changes statewide the last several years, and there are now multiple ways for you to cast your ballot in this election, a few of which include mail-in absentee ballots, in-person early voting before Election Day, May 16, 17, and 18, 2024, and in-person on Election Day, May 21st, 2024. If you don't know where or how to vote, please call the Franklin County Clerk's Office at 502-875-8702 or check out their website. It's loaded with current election information. Voting is a right in this country provided by our Constitution, and these newer voting opportunities will hopefully increase turnout. I sincerely hope you will honor our veterans and those that are currently serving and exercise your right. It's been an honor to serve as the MC for this event. I'd like to thank all the folks that aren't on camera for all of the work to make this possible. I'd like to thank the FPB staff, the Frankfort Area Chamber of Commerce, camera folks, IT folks, chamber staff. That concludes this forum. Thank you for joining in.